All right, thanks for tuning in again to an episode of Getting Your Life Back with Cade Cooper. You know, I've put out 5 episodes and I haven't put out an interview yet. One of the main reasons is I love the sound of my voice, and I realize that no one can quite do it like I can. So that's not true, and that thought has actually got me in a lot of trouble at different times. So in all serious, I've thought about who I would bring on, and as I've explained for you guys, if you followed me from the beginning in my intro, I kind of explained that, you know, my goal here is not to try and change your religious beliefs or even a belief in God. It's not to try to sway you to any ideology or conviction. It's just sharing my story and my beliefs and how I got my life back. And again, you know, I throw out questions. I'm certainly not always right, but I like to bring on different people that have used different ways and methods in which they've overcome things. The hope being, at a time that's been incredibly difficult for a lot of people, with a lot of things that have happened the past few years, you can listen to different stories. And, you know, even if you don't like mine, that's totally fine, I understand, but maybe you'll listen to another one, and eventually maybe one will resonate with you, or you can pick up little pieces of different things people have done to, you know, overcome stuff and start living life and finding purpose. You know, as I prayed and as I really thought about who I wanted to shoot this out with, I wanted to start with the man that I know that, you know, I don't know a better man, and it's my younger brother, Clay. How old are you now?
I'm 35.
He's 35 and I'm 40. So we've got a 45-year-old, Cole, who's just dying to be on here, and, you know, we'll probably get him on eventually. And then I think Rhett, my brother's a professor, English professor out at SUU. Rhett's 43, I think. And I'm 40, and then we've got Clay, and then we've got Kip, who's
just turned 28.
He just turned 28. So we grew up with a family of 5 boys. I definitely was the middle child. My father being the oldest, and he was in a lot of ways the most obnoxious one of all of us. He's sadly not with us now. He passed 10 years ago. But, you know, Clay, why don't you want to share a little bit about what it's like growing up the 4th out of 5 boys in the Cooper household?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, just being, you know, having the example we had with my parents and with mom and dad in particular, I think that we were certainly taught to, like, look out for each other and love one another, but there was a lot of, you know, you have 5 boys in the house, there was a lot of, you know, horseplay. I don't know why I said horseplay, but, like, arguments, you know, fighting a little bit, teasing, a lot of teasing, but we had a pretty charmed upbringing. We had really good parents, and yeah, I think we're all better for it, and we all, at the very least, were taught to really try to look out for each other, love each other.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking about some things. You know, Cole, and he's since expressed some remorse for some of his actions, but, you know, when you're 5 boys with no sisters, you know, and like Clay said, my parents were absolutely phenomenal. And with my struggles, you know, a common component a lot of time with the people that have addiction is very early. They had a lot of traumatic stuff happen. And, you know, I had a pretty charmed life, a pretty privileged life, right? I was raised, you know, in a loving environment with 2 parents, you know, who supported us and loved us and gave us, you know, as much as they could. You know, one kind of funny story I was thinking about, you know, give you maybe just a little idea of growing up, is one day, you know, I used to be bigger than Clay, and I'm certainly not now, and we'll talk more about, you know, how Clay's kind of transformed himself as well. But we were out doing WWE wrestles on the tramp, and it's actually very dangerous what we're doing. But I would have these tables set up, and they would be like the 4 corners. And Clay was just a kid, and, you know, he was probably 8th or 9th grade, and I was probably a senior, and I would pick him up and suplex him from behind. But a little earlier, Cole was doing this to me, so it was definitely learned behavior. And I don't know why Cole started this. He just, you know, has some answering to do. But I remember one time Cole was beating me up, and Clay started to pray, and Cole looked over and in a fury said, "Are you praying?" And then he proceeded to assault Clay in the act of prayer. Well, Clay's prayer worked. Cole stopped beating me and, started to beat Clay, and he's since expressed some fear and regret of doing that and the ramifications of stopping someone from praying. But, it's something we can laugh about now, but, it's been neat as we've grown up. We're still close. We've definitely had our different ways, shapes, and forms, and I've already shared my story with you, but, as you got into high school, Clay, you want to share a little bit about what your passions were? And
even growing up, basketball was kind of a big thing in our house, and my dad was a big basketball player, and we grew up, and Cade and I in particular really took to it. But yeah, going through high school and stuff, I think, high school sports, high school basketball, I had a really close-knit, great group of friends that I'm still friends with today. But it was kind of a way to channel some of that, energy, Cooper energy or whatever it was. I think when we talk about, that cycle of violence really is what it is, where, not judging ourselves too harshly or not judging our older brothers too harshly, but that idea of, harming or hurting somebody else, I think that causes some lasting pain. So it's important that you start to develop like a tool set or a toolkit to kind of channel some of those emotions and feelings. And for me in high school, it was sports, but I think it was kind of the foundation that created a lot of anxiety in me and worry. And one way that kind of helped alleviate that was, I had, great friends, and I had a great family too, but also channeling that through like competition.
And it's interesting. I played sports too, and Clay mentions in one of his videos that I'll give you a link to about how some of the stress came even as a young kid, the stress to perform in sports.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I used to get a lot of stress about just playing well, and then really the stakes couldn't be very high. I mean, this is 2A high school basketball in rural Utah, so it's not like there were thousands watching, but nonetheless, I think I'd put a lot of pressure on myself, or I'd feel a lot of anxiety for competition, sometimes to the point where, it felt a little bit debilitating. And usually when the game would start, that would kind of fade into the backdrop. But leading up to it, I remember being young and just trying to make sense of why I felt so nervous or butterflies. I know that that's not unique to me, that a lot of real professional athletes still have those kinds of situations, and that's why sports psychology is such a big, prevalent practice these days. But yeah, I would do my best to just try to be a good person, thinking that I'd be rewarded by the universe afterwards, even if that meant that I played well in a 2A high school basketball game.
And Clay hit on the cycle of violence, and I'll talk about it in my story too, but, some of my regret is obviously it wouldn't play in my favor too well now, but, some improper coping skills and at times treating Clay bad and understanding that it's caused him some anxiety has, affected me, but it's been neat to see him heal and the things he's done. And for me, I certainly can, obviously it's a little bit of an emotional point, but, forgive myself for an extent because I was just a young guy. But at the same time, we realize, as you process your past, like these little things that we think are insignificant, without being addressed and dealt with, they can create situations that, last with us, right? When I was the ladies' man until about 7th grade, and the problem is I dumped them all the time, but like I was rolling, and then all of a sudden I got freckles, and I remember my buddy saying, "Hey, will you go out with Cade?" And I'm on the other side of the phone, just like we're pumping, and she's like, "No, thanks," and it shattered my confidence. It really did, and I thought, well, the biggest thing I'm insecure about is freckles, so it must be freckles. And not until I was 36 or 37 years old did I really start to overcome that. And I had such a debilitating fear of rejection when it came to women especially, I would not try anything unless I was absolutely certain there was no chance that I was rejected. And that was probably a blessing at certain times, because I got myself into some sticky situations and with people I probably shouldn't have, but I was just certain they weren't interested. But as we think about this, it makes me think about how, and I'll talk about this in later episodes, not to get too, I start to digress, but how things do. So we'll move forward a little bit. I mentioned in my story how I started a pest control business. Really, Clay was my business, me and my business partner, because it was him and his buddies who came out and sold pest control for me, and did it for 3-4 years. Around that time, Clay met his beautiful wife as well. But is there anything that sticks out to you
about selling pest control?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think just, there's a certain level of discomfort when you're knocking on anybody's door randomly and trying to sell them something that they didn't ask for necessarily. Not that they didn't need it, but you're just showing up at their door saying like, hey, can I get a credit card number and we'll spray your house for bugs. So I think that, there's that uncomfortable aspect. But I think also just opening you up to different experiences and people. I think the chance that I had to go to different neighborhoods and different cities and to meet people across the country. There was one summer where we traveled, and we started in the South and went to the Midwest. I think we ended in West Texas or around in Texas. Those were experiences that I think really helped me become a more fully formed person and understand that we're all a culmination of our experiences, and my experiences make me who I am up to this point. But my experiences aren't universal, that everyone has a different story, and it helps shape who they are. And I think the large scope of it helped me become a more like empathetic person as I met with people who's had different trials and, had different successes than me.
Yeah, I think the same. We were fortunate in a community where, our parents, they were, I think, always pretty open-minded and especially empathetic to everyone, right?
Sure.
And so it was just kind of in our nature. But, working with Clay was, we had a wonderful time, at different times going out and working. But it was just neat to be exposed to different ideologies. And it's, I often, my friend Clint Olson's like, there's something with Fillmore. It has produced more interesting people, because he's met a few of us, right? So he's a little fascinated with it. But that was, a great time. So we'll fast forward a few more years. So Clay had met his wife, and I share this part, my story, and again, my story is in my episodes 2 through 4, but I got thrown into what's called a manic episode, and I can quickly explain mania if you haven't seen those. Mania is a diagnosis in the DSM, which is a manual for mental illness, the characteristics of which are inability to control spending, sexual impulses, think about consequences, lack of sleep. You will go after anything pleasurable. If anything gets in your way, you become, pretty obstinate pretty quick. So through some stresses and, the wrong diagnosis and some medication, I was thrown into a manic episode. Well, this episode was fragmented for me, and I don't remember a lot of things that happened in it, but it coincided with the birth of Clay's son. And, it probably couldn't have come at a worse time at the time, because our father had just passed away in November the previous year. And really what happened is I had no clue how to process that myself. And with a history of addiction to numb, I got thrown into that state, and it definitely had some ramifications. But, Clay, if you want to you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think, our dad passed away in November of 2012, and my son was born on the 4th of July in 2013. And in that time, between then, I think we're all dealing with the loss of someone we loved, like, immeasurably, right? Somebody who was, a collective hero. And becoming a father after having lost your father, it already puts you in this really contemplative state, because you think like, what was it that my dad gave to me, and what can I give to my son that are, where he can feel for me the way I feel about my dad, or that I can equip him with the things that he needs to succeed in life. And I tell people, like, I didn't realize that protective instinct and how strong it could be until I became a dad. So I became a father, he was born, and that instinct came in to just say, like, he's mine, protect him, watch out for him, do everything you can to help this baby boy be healthy and strong. And, concurrently with that, Cade just described his experience going through mania. He and another brother of mine were off having a manic episode. And I think addiction, those of us that have loved ones that are experiencing addiction or that are going through a state like that, it makes those loved ones feel like strangers. And I think that that's what's really jarring. Is I always looked at Cade, and even, at times when we were younger and would fight, I always looked at him with some familiarity. He was always my brother, and he was my brother then too, but there was something different about his addiction where it felt much more foreign. I just didn't know who he was. And that fired within me even more protective instincts, because I just became a father and I needed to protect my son. And there was a history there that, that cycle of violence where we had growing up, where we would fight with each other. And all of that just kind of came up to the surface. So I think that when I became a father, I was just kind of confronted with some of that past history, and how should I sift through that to make sure that I can be the best dad I can be for my kid, and that I can be present for my spouse. And I think you walk through a little bit of a refiner's fire, but ultimately it's kind of what kicked off for me looking to get some professional therapy or help from somebody who could help me kind of sift through all the emotions I was feeling.
And I think, as I've taught more about addiction, and I've done interventions, and I've done an intervention with a family member as well. And I don't know if you could have ever struck the balance better between taking care of your family, yet being there for me. And obviously there were some psychological and anxiety effects, but, it wasn't to Clay's detriment, right? He didn't go too much trying to help Cade at the neglect of his family. And so, I recall two things I probably have never talked to him about, but I remember getting off the airplane, and I had went just crazy out in Texas, and him looking at me, and, at the time, Clay wasn't big like this, but he just said, "I'm scared of you." And I hated to hear that, and I didn't fully understand why, but it impacted me. Like, I don't want my loved ones to be scared of me. And through my episode, and I've been fairly ambiguous because there's not a real need to delve into specifics of what was going on, but Clay was aware, and my family member was aware of what was going on as I was spending obscene amounts of money and just going wild. And I can imagine how unnerving it was seeing someone who was fairly stable just snap, right? And so they were trying to get a hold of me and talk to me. And one night it was late and I was heading somewhere I shouldn't have been. And he called me, and, I probably never received a more important phone call. But, it basically said, "Cade, what about your kids?" And Clay asked me about my kids, and it set off a chain of events, because I had forgotten I had children. I literally forgot that there's these two people here. So it was a major shifting force in a trajectory in which, brought me to a point of healing. But, through that, Clay and I have always stayed very close. He's been my biggest supporter, of getting healthy. As I've really delved into psychology with everything and understanding human behavior, it's become painfully aware of, some of the stuff I've put my family through. And, one tough thing about addiction, at its core, addiction is self-centeredness in nature. And it's not necessarily that it's selfish, but it is the inability to see how your actions affect others. And so when we're in our addiction, we're victims, right? And we don't see it, and everything is hurting us. So, when I work with someone who's starting to get clean, or when I went to rehab, the first thing that they try to do is to make you feel. It's whether it's to make you sad or mad or hurt or whatever. I was a professional non-feeler, right? And so the reason I changed was for me. I had to do it for me, but I did it for me so I could show up for the people I loved. Because I had, when I realized the anxiety I had caused him, the hell I'd put my mom through, the hell of my kids, the hell of my ex-wife and stuff, I just said it's enough, and by the grace of God, like I have the last 4 or 5 years, I think, been very strong and sturdy and supportive. So the love of my family, my brothers, they are my best friends. There'll never be anyone that'll take their place. And in the end, I believe this life is about relationships, and I believe relationships are the most powerful agents of change. And there's no one that can affect you quite the same way. So I'm extremely grateful for you for.
Yeah, well, I mean, we talk about, relationships, but you've been there for me as much as I've ever been there for you. And I think that the reality of life is that sometimes you hurt people you love. And that doesn't mean that you don't love them. It doesn't mean that you don't care. And we've all done that. I've hurt people that I've loved too. So I think it's a matter of accepting grace and giving grace when it's needed, and understanding, when you went through this recovery process and returned basically to us, or to my memory, is my older brother who I've always known. It was something to be celebrated, but it also came with a certain kind of pathos from you where, grief can be an incredible teacher and loss can be an incredible teacher. And I think that it's difficult that we have to go through those things, and maybe we don't always have to go through them, but there's a silver lining that sometimes loss and pain can help us, can deepen our empathy and deepen our love for other folks. And you've been able to help other people in their path to recovery. So I think that things can come full circle.
Yeah, and to explain some of my reaction, what I'm feeling is not shame or not regret. I've processed this stuff, and Clay and I've talked about it, and I'm not going back, because in the end I realized I did the best I could with the knowledge I had, and Clay did too. And I think that's, for the most part, around the board with most people I've worked with, when we really start to get them to heal from their past, to realize I just had an improper way of knowing how to deal with my trauma, and so it was typically through some toxic coping mechanisms. So these tears are of happiness now, and I have no problem with letting my emotions flow whenever, wherever. I mean, at this point, we'll watch Disney movies, and God, it takes the littlest thing, and I'll tear up, and my daughter's like, oh, he's crying again. My son's like, gives me a big hug and makes sure I'm okay. But when I get around my family, we certainly got it from my dad. So what's neat with Clay, and now transitioned into his healing, is he's got a pretty remarkable thing, and a pretty remarkable way that he has healed, and it's reached some incredible lengths that I'll let him share with you. And like I said, this podcast is different ways and methods of healing, and his has not only helped him heal, but a lot of thousands upon thousands of people heal as well. And it's something called Discovery Deadlift. But you want to talk a little bit about its infancy and what?
Yeah, I think. It's probably important to note that the years leading up to Discovery Deadlift, I had been trying to do some self-care through therapy, and I've had a couple of great therapists that have really helped me understand boundaries and how to be there for the people I love, but also how to make sure that I'm taking care of my own mental health and well-being. So when the pandemic hit, a global pandemic is enough to fire a lot of anxious thoughts. And one of the things that I had really picked up as part of this recovery process, in addition to therapy, was weightlifting, weight training. And I had gotten into powerlifting specifically. I had access to a really state-of-the-art gym, and things were going quite well. And then the pandemic hit and everything closed down. So I was able to quickly get a barbell and some plates off of some classified ads. And I was just lifting in my garage intermittently when I would work from home, as we were all home at that time. This is, April 2020. Until eventually I one day just had a little bit of cabin fever and decided I wanted to go outside. I've always appreciated the therapeutic element of nature and kind of getting out into a space or place that's larger than yourself. And I just loaded the barbell and plates into my wife's Subaru at the time, and I drove southwest to a lake nearby my house, and I pulled the plates out and I did some deadlifts there and had a powerlifting workout. And coming back, I just felt so great about it. And I remember calling my wife and saying, "Hey, I'm heading home," and it's kind of a strange thing I just did. And she's like, "Well, how was it?" And I said, "It felt great." And it kind of just started from there, where I would go to somewhere, or I would hike to somewhere where I could be alone, and then I would get a workout in. But hiking somewhere with weights is a little bit of an arduous process, so it became a pretty intense workout. But I was starting to fill that void by combining two things that I love and two things that have really helped me contextualize my place in life and really helped tamp down my anxiety. And I initially would film the lifts because I wanted to check on my form. I was new to powerlifting and trying to make sure that I was hitting the right cues. But when you're outside these beautiful places, it started to become pretty striking. And then we started hiking and going to different places, and my wife joined me and our two kids, and it kind of became a family affair, and posted a few things on Instagram and TikTok, and it got a little bit of traction. So now, every week, or at least every other week or week and a half, we go hike somewhere new, and I deadlift, and it's a really niche thing, and I guess there's a demographic out there that are interested in it.
Well, it's neat to me, Clay's being modest. I don't need to be as modest because it's not about me, but he's had numerous videos go viral, and it's been neat to watch. How does someone, what's the best way for them to learn about Discovery Deadlift or find your content?
You can just search Discovery Deadlift on Instagram or TikTok. Those are the two major platforms that I share those posts. And sometimes it's a little bit like a journal entry of, here's what we did, or here's where I was, and here are the thoughts I had, and here's the workout. But it's it's out there, but it's something that it's become a key component of my toolkit to tend to my own mental health and wellness, because every time I do it, I feel fulfilled. When I'm out there with the people I love the most, and I'm doing something hard, and I'm pushing myself to a certain limit, it's really rewarding. So people ask, how's that hike back with the weights, or how's the ruck back with the weights on those lifts that are further away? And I say, it's hard, but usually there's this euphoric feeling afterwards. And I think it's just because I was able to slow things down and be with the people I love, doing something I love in nature. So you can find it on Instagram or TikTok.
I'll have a link on those in the description as well, so you guys can click on it. Or do you sell these shirts?
Yeah, I probably need to restock them, but there's a link tree on my site. I haven't stocked that stuff for a while, but if you're ever interested, there might be a few left. There's some stickers and stuff.
Okay, so there's a way there as well. You want to tell me a little bit about bodybuilding.com?
Oh yeah, I did a docu-series with bodybuilding.com in the spring of 2021. They had reached out, seeing some of the content that I had posted, and were just interested in it. So there's a 3-part docu-series. If you Google Discovery Deadlift, I think that's probably one of the top things that would pop up. And it talks a little bit more just about the advent of Discovery Deadlift, how it's been a really positive force for good in my life, and how it's caught some traction actually, and a little bit of a movement for some folks that have been looking for something in theirs too. Again, as a part or a component of your overall plan, it's something that's been good.
Yeah, I encourage you to check out the videos. It really is incredible and professionally shot and well done. I think
Professionally shot by my wife on an iPhone with the gimbal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she just has a gimbal. I think sometimes people ask about the who's your crew. I've had people come in and be like, well, let's see the production crew that are helping you carry weights. And it's my 9-year-old son and my 5-year-old daughter and my wife. And
well, that's a hell of a production crew. I know them.
So. They're the best team a guy could ask for. They don't really help carry the weights very much, but I don't fault them for that. But yeah, my wife is she's incredible, and she is just good at basically anything she tries to do. So I would set up a stationary camera, and then she's like, hey, let me get a couple of equipment. Let me get some equipment and look into this a little bit. So it's great because I can just basically hike and lift, and she shoots it. And then I like the editing process, so sometimes all the time I'll be the one who edits it. So,
as we talk a little bit about Clay's wife, a large part of my group is divorced or never married, and for me, seeing that dynamic, it's kept me from settling. It's made me believe in romantic love with partners through a lot of different circumstances, and it's very clear whenever I go over that there's no question he and his wife absolutely love each other, and their children love him. How long have you been married now?
Oh man, 12 years.
What would you...
12 and a half years.
If you could, obviously it's a loaded question, but if there's a couple things you could say that have helped you guys to, because it's not just that they're doing well, I believe they've consistently grown more and more in love, but...
I think we both care about each other's mental health and our own mental health, and we hold each other accountable. So we're there for one another, and we know that we can speak about our concerns or our fears. But there's also a mutual encouragement to seek the help of a professional if we need it. So I think just the fact that we try to be folks that tend to our own mental wellness, it makes us more present parents, and it makes us more present for each other. It's not really advice, but try to find somebody who's the best person and I think that's a great way to start. But any relationship, and I'm by no means an expert, but I think it just takes patience and communication, and you have to work on it. It's something that you have to tend to like a garden, and I'm lucky that I have somebody who wants to do that together.
It's been neat to see. It's been neat to see, and it's definitely shifted the way I have dated and what I'm looking for, because I won't settle for any less. I think between them and my dad passed away about 3 weeks before. He didn't look too good. He was towards the end and dying of renal failure and malignant hypertension, and later pulmonary hypertension were extremely rare forms of high blood pressure in the blood and also in the lungs. But I remember him telling us to leave because he wanted to make out with his sweetheart. And, I remember leaving and thinking that might have been one of the most romantic things I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think the fact that that's what he wanted, and that mom loved dad well enough in that beleaguered state to, she wanted to be with him too. And I think that, mom and dad, and not to embarrass mom here, but they had plenty of arguments and disagreements. They were plenty spirited growing up, and the Cooper house was one that, friends and neighbors would joke that they could hear us. So it was not a quiet type of thing. I think that there was passion and fierceness there, and that might work for some and not work for others. But for my parents, I think that they went through their own trials, but ultimately their love for each other didn't wane. And at the end of Dad's life, it was just so clear how much he loved mom, and of course it was so clear how much mom loved him as she took care of him. And, that's a pretty awesome example for me of saying, hey, if you tend to this garden, like, you can have this with somebody that you love.
For me, seeing that, it stripped away all the surface stuff, right? The stuff that's still important, because I think it's important to be attracted. And, Clay's wife's a knockout, But in the end, none of us stay attractive forever. And at that point, my dad is, it was the soul, it was how much she loved that person. And at that moment, I said, I will never settle for anything less than love like that. Well, and yeah. As we keep going, Clay, as we pivot to Discovery Deadlift, I just want to point out a few things I think are neat, right? When I was getting ready to launch this project, I've talked with Clay, right? And I think Clay's, my guess is, he's kind of like me, where at our core we want to help people the most, and I think it's what grounds us, because in this type of environment, it's very easy to get caught up in the amount of views or things, and mine's in its infancy, but at different times, I'll find myself thinking that, and there's this temptation, or not even temptation, but this inclination to view a view as just a view. My content, I believe, will impact you no matter what, and my hope is that it's good, and it may trigger you, but I don't think being triggered is always bad. When I'm triggered, it lets me know something that's emotionally affected me, and I want to find out why it did and why I want to work at it. But that's been something that I have struggled with throughout this time. Ego for me is my problem at this time, and my therapist is, at first he's like, Cade, we always, well, I tell him, I'm like, Ryan, I had no self-love, and you've certainly done I think you did too good of a job, because now I have delusion, visions of grandiosity, and I think I'm more wonderful than I am, so you're gonna have to peg me back down. Well, I kind of joke, right? But whether you're a doctor and you want to maintain your bedside manner as you're working with people that are sick forever, the special ones are able to still do that and see each individual case as a case. Well, a couple weekends ago, right before I launched this, I was down with Clay and my brother Rhett, who's had success when he's wanted to put time in with his TikTok as well, and he had posted a video, I think, and with a couple hours, I think it was at 120,000 views, and he had mentioned he'd got one that was way more than that, on Instagram as well, and it's never changed him. And the neatest thing I think about all of it, because I watch his videos and his content, and he goes to breathtaking places, and I love the music, and it's just really well done. His interactions with people that he doesn't know, and there's one that I thought was incredibly neat. If you look at Clay, if these guys that will say stuff that are half the world away on a keyboard, it's obviously much easier to say stuff. But my guess is, even with me, I don't get much saying to me, and you certainly wouldn't want to him. But this guy one day had said something that wasn't very nice. You remember what you told me your response was?
Oh yeah, I think the reception to Discovery Deadlift really has been overwhelmingly positive, but it's human nature for us, I think, to focus on some negatives, and occasionally it's a niche thing. It might not be for everybody. I'm deadlifting in the mountains and woods, and it's kind of, people might be like, what the hell is this? But yeah, there's been a few folks, and rare occasions, but they'll maybe say something derisive or say like, this is the dumbest. And I kind of just, it's been a really helpful exercise for me, because it doesn't, sincerely, it doesn't bother me. That's not that I'm not like past feeling, and if somebody got super personal, I'm sure it could bother me, but them simply not liking what I'm doing is totally fine. And I usually just respond. I think in the example I shared with them, I just responded with that to say, like, essentially, oh, hey, it's okay if this isn't your thing. I understand it's kind of a niche thing, and no worries. And then they responded again, and it was negative, until eventually I just said, hey, this is totally fine. I want you to know that I do this because I love it, and your distaste for it won't really influence whether I do or do not keep doing it. But I said, in my experience, when somebody lashes out at somebody else that they don't know and have these kind of strong emotions, then it's likely that they're maybe battling or dealing with something else in their life that they're, this is just a symptom of. And the tenor of it all changed, and we're buddies now. Like he DMs me and we stay in contact, and he basically, just said, yeah, like I am going through some stuff, and I'm sorry. And it was totally fine because, like I said, we've all at different times hurt people, whether intentionally or unintentionally, but we all have the ability to stop doing that. We have the ability to write our course. And this guy did that. So, Discovery Deadlift, you're in a hyper-masculine space with weightlifting, but I think it's really important for everyone, and sometimes men in particular in this space, to be able to address some of those anxieties that they face or those insecurities. You don't have to be so stoic all the time. That there's a community out there, and there are people out there that will listen to you and want to offer help when and where they can. And a lot of times with those commenters, that's usually the case. And if not, if it's just a troll situation, then just water off my back.
I love that. I love, having someone come at you, and instead of, seeking to be understood, seeking to understand, and being adept and, understanding enough to realize that this really had nothing to do with him. You know what I mean? The person, I don't think, just hates weightlifting. He may, but I doubt it, hates nature or weightlifting. But, the ability to, when someone treats you like that, to empathize with something that you may not have any idea specifically what's going on. But a lot of time when we do lash out, it's usually not personal. I mean, we were... A couple of weeks ago, I was up with my buddies in St. George, and they're giving people Tottenham gun names, and they named me Trigger. And I don't know if I like that name or not, but, I have a gift for triggering people. And, I used to, and, I'll talk later, but I used to like to trigger people. And, my ego and pride got me in a lot of trouble a few years ago. Another time I'll say that, but... I can be triggering by nature, and I don't mean to be anymore unless I feel like someone needs to be, and I'll do it. But I love the way he responded to that. And the second part of that, Clay, is, as this grows and as you see these things and these different opportunities come, and Clay, gets offers with different partnership deals and stuff, how have you been able to maintain what's important and what you want Discovery Deadlift to really be, and not get caught up in the acclaim or endorsements or things of that nature?
Yeah, well, and it's all relative, right? It's a whole spectrum as far as what acclaim or fame is, right? I have some folks interested, and there are certainly accounts larger, but it has grown to a point where there are people that have reached out, and I think for me, the authenticity is important to me, and the reason I do Discovery Deadlift, or kind of remembering that day in the spring of 2020 and how I was feeling and when I first went out to do what I did, is really still kind of the North Star of what drives Discovery Deadlift forward. So that's not to say that if there's not a cool opportunity with a company I really love that reaches out, that I won't entertain those opportunities, or I haven't. To this point, I've done some partnership stuff, but I think it's just, does this partnership kind of inform the message or the spirit of what I'm doing? And I've had a lot of really great folks reach out, and it just wasn't compatible because it wasn't really, it didn't really capture the essence of what I wanted it to, and I have had some that have. And also sometimes it's not always that like big of a deal, right? They're like, hey, do you want a new barbell? And like, yeah, I want a barbell. So we can have a conversation about like who that company is and what their goals are. But I think to any type of grounding that I need to, I think I'm already probably sometimes a little bit too self-deprecating, but I try to keep grounded on my own. And then if something's exciting and it's an opportunity, I'll hear it out. But if it doesn't really align with my core values, a thanks but no thanks. And yeah, I've had options of both.
It sounds like in the end you bring yourself back to that guy in 2020 with a family, not with an uncertain future, with an uncertain world, who was anxious, and you found out how to, and that the next person to see that is the why.
Yeah, Yeah, the find your why, right? And I think it, you know, in life, I guess, not everything has to be a life or death decision. Not everything has to carry significant ethical implications or moral implications. Sometimes you just make a choice that doesn't have any larger bearing on who you are as a person. But when you find something that you love and something that matters a lot to you, whether it's a relationship or your family or a hobby, or like a hobby like this with Discovery Deadlift, I think that those things that you that are harder to obtain, you seem to esteem them more, and you develop that dearness to those things. So, yeah, remembering who you are and why you started, and having that kind of be a governing litmus test for opportunities that come forth. And again, I think Cade has a very high opinion of me, and I appreciate that, and of the successes with the social media. It's all relative. I mean, I think by a lot of standards, I'm still a fairly small account, but I've been really surprised at the growth we have had, or the interest we have had, because yeah, I remember freaking out when like there were 500 people interested in following. So yeah, now there's 100,000+. It feels kind of wild.
Yeah. And the neat thing is, I think, again, the interactions. I think if we trace that back, is I watched our father interact with people, and our mom as well. It was a common thing I'd hear at the end with my dad when we had his funeral. We're from a very small town in rural central Utah, population about 2,000 people, and we had 2 viewings for him, and from what I understand, not even everyone got through the second viewing, but a common thing I would hear about my father was, your dad was my best friend. And I don't know how many times I heard that. A lot. And I realized these people actually viewed my father as that, but one thing my father passed on to Clay and I and my mother was, no one is better than anyone else. And sometimes, whether it's, justified or not, people will place levels of importance on you giving them their attention that you may not realize, or you might not even feel worthy of. But he taught me that when you ask someone how they're doing, and when you listen to someone, that these are not trivial interactions. And when you had his attention, and when he asked something, he was zeroed in on that person, and he cared, and my mom is the exact same way. So it's definitely helped me, as I'm doing this. I see a lot of influencers that do all types of different things to try and whatever make it means, right? And I there's no judgment either way. There's a lot of them I love watching because they're just very entertaining entertainment. There's ones like Clay that obviously there's the personal connection, but it's inspiring, it's neat. It just moves me the way the videos are created, and for me, Clay knows a different side of me where I can, say off the wall things and tease and be ridiculous and stuff. And I think I probably could raise some eyebrows, and I probably will. But again, like
Andy thinks you're the funniest person in the world.
His
My daughter thinks he's the funniest person in the world.
Well, then I'll take it. I'll take it. We have some epic dance battles, and I told her I brought new stuff, and she brings out gymnastics. I'm too old for gymnastics. It gets me every time. I've got tendonitis, because I refuse to not live. So she understands my weaknesses. But what this is again is just how to get your life back. And like Clay said, I'll echo it, I don't know everything. I don't. I know some things that I believe are universal principles that will help across the board. But again, I'm just trying to throw out different ideas because at my core, I know what it's like to suffer. I know what it's like to lose hope. I know what it's like not to want to live. And I know what it's like to start to reclaim your life and to start to dig out of the trenches. And I don't want to portray my life because it's been any worse than anyone else's, because I truly don't believe that. In closing, and we'll wrap up, when I was at my first rehab one day, we were sharing our life stories, and that's typically something you'll do, right? And you know, mine's on my episodes, but I shared what had happened to me at the time. At the time, I had just lost my $1 million business and all these things, and you know, I didn't know why I had done these things. Well, I listened to some girls talk about being molested by therapists at 3 or 4 years old. And you know, sadly, in my work, I've talked to a lot of people that have been through that now, and you know, been maybe a small part in helping them process that, but I couldn't fathom pain like that. And I remember getting done, and they came up to me and were like, Cade, we can't imagine what you've been through. I was like, are you kidding me? You had someone in a position of authority violate you in the most sacred way possible. And they're like, but you've lost millions of dollars. And I realized pain is kind of a relative thing, right? And my pain has been no worse or better than anyone else's, I believe. It can be dangerous to, you know, not own our pain. You know, I think it's good to say sometimes, hey, there are people that have it worse because it will give us perspective. But at the same time, if we're constantly trying to process your pain by saying, I shouldn't feel this way because someone has it worse, I think that is not always healthy. So in the end, I'm grateful for a wonderful support system that I have, not just in this project, but throughout my life. But in the end, it is my immediate family and my children that God blessed me with, because I don't know a greater group of people on earth. So I'm grateful to be able to have Clay to start this off today, and for you guys to meet him again. I'll have some links in the description of this episode where you can check stuff out with him. You know, I encourage you to share it with people. It's moving, and I think it has the potential to help a lot of people. If you like what I say, if it resonates with you, you know, I've done different topics. I will continue to bring other people on. I will also address specific issues down the road that are pertinent, mainly social and mental health issues and ways I've healed. If it helps you, the best way to find me is this YouTube channel. If you subscribe and enable your notifications, you'll be notified whenever I put out new content. Mine's in its infancy. I'm still trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing, but you know, it looks like about 2 times a week I put it out. But you know, for you that have reached out, for you that have talked to me, I appreciate it. And if it touches you, if you find hope, please share it with people. In the end, my motivation is just to help relieve the suffering of people, to prevent them from trauma that they don't have to go through, and to help them heal from trauma that they've already been through, so that we can quit saying that we're just trying to make it by in this life. And when someone asks us that, we can say we're living. Thanks for coming on today.